on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way.
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
We say fuck a lot. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
Happy Father's Day, Dylan.
Thanks.
How are you today?
I'm doing wonderful. It's just a great day.
Wonderfully.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm doing wonderful. You can be wonderfully. That's okay.
Okay, great. Yeah, we had an interesting visit from my dad.
Always taxing.
Always.
It's a good guy.
Always a journey, if you will.
It is. I can only take small doses. That's why I tend
Dylan
to...
woke up and made himself a Father's Day brunch. You make me feel like a failure, Dylan, but I'm glad that you got to enjoy a delicious breakfast.
Well, I enjoy cooking for other people.
Handcrafted by Dylan.
And that's what makes me happy.
Man, it was delicious. You made us like a Southwestern omelet.
I thought it was pretty good.
It was damn good.
Yes, sir.
Is that going on your restaurant menu?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I think we need like a GoFundMe and raise money to open Dylan's restaurant.
Yeah, it's going to be called the Greasy Spoon.
Is it going to be the
Yeah.
No, for real. We've talked for a few years about how we kind of have a dream to open like a bar, but we also want like a food venue as well.
Yeah.
So it'd be kind of fun to have a pub.
This is compelling.
You can have like a Mountain Murders pub.
Compelling
well, it is.
audio.
Well, like people who listen to us, Dylan, they'll listen to us talk about anything.
Talk about our dreams and our aspirations.
Yeah, I know Dylan's a great little home chef.
I've enjoyed cleaning and cooking on Father's Day.
Well, that's what you should be doing.
And that's what makes me happy.
Okay, good. Yeah, see, you're being extra daddy. I'm pretty sure I heard you listening to Maroon 5 earlier, which is like your dad's soundtrack. So we're good.
Yeah, I'm going to be extra daddy later. Yeah.
Okay, we have a sponsor today. Dylan, would you like to thank our new patron?
Yes, I would like to thank Angie Marie, sponsor of today's episode.
Wow, you're over there feeling awfully squirrely.
She so gracefully and smartly, right? These are great adjectives. Went over to Patreon and subscribed and is supporting the podcast directly.
Yeah, she's sponsoring today's show. Dylan, this is a case we've had a few folks request, and I thought since it was basically the 2-year anniversary a few days ago that we would make it this week's case.
For one, I cannot believe it's already been 2 years since this tragic event. But yeah, I'm sure there is a lot of information that's finally washed out in the courts and such. So let's get into it.
All right, let's get started. Dylan, 5-year-old Summer Moon Utah Wells lived in Rogersville, Tennessee with her parents and 3 brothers. Are you familiar with Rogersville?
I'm not.
I thought you might be. But I went ahead and did a little research, Dylan. It's located in Hawkins County. It was settled in 1775 by the grandparents of Davy Crockett.
Oh, wow.
It's located about 65 miles northeast of Knoxville. And I can say I've never been to Rogersville. I wasn't even quite sure of the geolocation. Had to look it up on a map.
I'm sure we kind of go past it when we go up through Kentucky to Michigan. I would guess that seems like kind of northeast.
Possibly. I thought that it kind of might be located between maybe Knoxville and, what is that, Johnson City?
Yes.
Maybe more in that area. Yeah. So Charlie Chase from the famous Crook and Chase country radio duo is originally from Rogersville. That's kind of their big claim to fame.
And Davy Crockett's grandparents are the founders.
Yeah. Thought that was a piece of interesting trivia I would share with you. On June 15th of 2021, around 7 a.m., Donald Wells left for work in Jonesboro, which is about 45 minutes away from Rogersville. His wife, Candace, got up readying for a busy day. According to the Wells, 5-year-old Summer had slept in their bed the night before. Candace woke Summer up around 7 as they had plans to take Candace's mother, and we might call her Grandis. Because her name is actually Candace as well. So you've got grandmother Candace, so we might call her Grandis from time to time.
Okay.
That's kind of a nickname she's earned in the press over the last few years.
Well, and also to keep the two separated as you're talking about it.
Right. So Grandis had some kind of knee injury and needed to go to the emergency room at the hospital. The three, Candace, Grandis, and Summer, leave in the grandmother's truck and drive into town. And it seems like where they live is a very rural area, and it's the kind of place that like you have to kind of get down off the mountain to get into town. So it might be a bit of a drive.
So you're literally going to town. It's like a big trip.
Yeah, because I think they live in a pretty rural community. Now, after dropping off Grandis, Candace gets a call from Hunter, who is 15 years old, and he is the son of her best friend, Allison. They haven't spent a whole lot of time together, I guess in the past few weeks or whatever. Hunter invites them over. And so Candace and Summer go over to Allison's house, where Hunter is, to hang out, just kind of while they are waiting for the grandmother to finish up at the hospital, which is understandable. You have a 5-year-old. Nobody wants to wait around at the hospital. It can take hours. It's very boring.
No, the emergency room's the worst. I mean, it really is.
It just sucks the life right out of you.
Oh, my God. And I think they intentionally make it, like, super slow. Seriously.
Candace and Summer spent some time with Hunter before Grandis phoned to say she was ready to be picked up. The three go to pick the grandmother up at the hospital, and then they drop off a prescription at a Walgreens pharmacy. And they're told it's going to take anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes to be filled at the pharmacy. While waiting, the four decide to head to a local swimming hole where Summer gets into the water. And this swimming hole, Dylan, has been called the horse pond. But I didn't get exactly a description to accurately say if it's a pond or more like maybe a big river. It looks like a river almost from the pictures that I've seen online. Now, according to Hunter, Summer's in the water, she's splashing around, she's hanging out, whatever. And afterwards, she's cold, which makes sense if it is a mountain, creek, or river. I mean, the water temp's pretty low.
Right.
And little kids do get cold. I've seen my youngins with blue lips running around the creek.
And you're like, hey, sit out and warm up for a minute. And they're like, no.
Yeah, they want to bust it wide open, even though it's like frigid temperatures.
Though they look like they've had no oxygen for 10 minutes.
It's true.
Because they're literally purple.
After they wrap up swimming, Mom and Grandis change Summer into a long sleeve jacket and a pair of pants.
Okay, warm her up, get her out of her wet clothes.
Now, while they're at Walgreens, Hunter told Chris McDonough with the Interview Room, which is a YouTube show, that Dawn phoned Candace to say there was some man up on their property who was trying to touch the little kids. And when asked why did he do this, Hunter said he had no idea like what was going on, other than Dawn phoned her about every 2 hours to check in while he was working, and this happened to be just one of those phone calls to come in. And Dawn is warning her there's a man up on our property who's a pedophile or who's trying to touch little kids, and that Hunter thought this call was suspicious.
Well, yeah. Well,
and
for
strange.
one, that's something that doesn't happen very often. So if you were hearing about this anywhere around you, you would remember it, and it would strike you as odd. I mean, I can't imagine who would hear that and not think it's a strange situation.
After picking up the medication, the group stops at Sonic for slushies. Candace and Grandis then go into a grocery store for shopping. Now, according to Hunter, the windows were rolled up in the truck and the vehicles was turned off. So it's a summer day, hot. They're going to leave Hunter and this 5-year-old sleeping child in a hot vehicle. Doesn't really make sense to me. He said Candace was in the store for over an hour, but she has disputed this claim, stating that she only left them in the car for about 5 minutes, that all she did was run in to pick up like a gallon of milk.
Well, that's an awful big disparity between the two perspectives, right? An hour compared to 5. I mean, that's way off.
Well, there's a lot of discrepancies in this story, Dylan. And I don't know if there's something sinister at play or just some confusion about times. because there seems to be a lot of discrepancies in timelines as we get on into the story.
Now, I don't know anything about Hunter's character. I mean, but why would he lie about how long he'd been in the car, even if he was off a little bit and it's more like 35, 40 minutes? But I could see why she would feel the need to lie if you left your kid out in a hot car for an hour with the windows rolled up, right? So, I mean, if I'm wondering who might be stretching the truth, I got to imagine it's the mom.
After popping in the grocery store for 5 minutes or up to an hour, I'm not sure, the four stop at a shop called the Hippie House, which is a smoke shop, and alcohol is sold there. Now, according to Hunter, Candace bought him a vape and a twisted tea, though he was underage. Candace then drives them to that horse stable park, once again, where Grandma stays on her phone in the car. So this is the part that I'm confused about, because I found that they went to this little creek or so for just a few minutes, and then it seems like they left, and then maybe they went back to swim more.
Okay.
But I'm not 100% sure, and I couldn't find a lot of clarification because there's so many conflicting news reports about what exactly went down. Because again, it seems the story has changed some from like the initial reports to what we've gotten over the course of 2 years.
Well, yeah, and that comes from every station. We see this all the time, and it's gotten to the point where they hardly even offer retractions or, clarifications on these.
Yes.
Is everyone's rushing to be the first. And in this day and age, everything's so fast, digital technology, all that. Oftentimes, it takes a good year for the real story to come out. But you hear all kinds of stuff in the initial reports.
Well, whether it was the first encounter at the swimming hole or they went back a second time, like I said, I'm not 100% sure because I've heard conflicting stories. But this is coming from an interview with Hunter that appeared on the Interview Room on that YouTube channel. He says that they go down to the horse stable park where this watering hole, the swimming hole is, and that Grandma stays behind in the truck. She's on her phone. So they get out of the car to go swimming again, or the truck. Hunter's drinking that twisted tea at this time. Okay. Then Summer was in the water. Candace and Hunter are watching TikTok videos. They're scrolling through Facebook on their phones. Candace was taking photos and videos of Summer swimming. And while swimming, Hunter says Summer went underwater for just a few seconds. This made him nervous, so he got in to make sure she was okay, and he kind of pulled her out of the water. But he claims when she came back up, she was laughing.
Okay.
And fine. He says she was only underwater for about 4 or 5 seconds. But according to Allison, Candace dropped Hunter off, and when she said, hey, can I go say hi to Summer, who's in the truck? Allison's like, I want to go say hi. And Summer is sleeping. That's what Candace tells her. Like, you can't go wake her up. She's asleep. She's napping. She's tired from swimming. Allison will later say her 15-year-old son Hunter was incredibly quiet when he returned home. And she thought he almost seemed traumatized by something.
Oh, God.
Like he was behaving very oddly. Hunter then went to his girlfriend's house and upon return admitted to Allison that Candace had given him that twisted tea and that vape.
Okay.
So at first she's thinking maybe he just felt guilty. Like when he came home, he was acting strangely because he was feeling guilty.
Because he knows his mom would not approve.
Because he had this alcoholic beverage and a vape.
And getting nicked up on the teens.
And like this is stuff he's not supposed to be doing. But she's not 100% sure that's the only thing that went down. Of course, there are folks out there in the internet world who have speculated a few things. That possibly something happened to Summer while they were swimming. And or that maybe Candace was trying to initiate some sort of inappropriate relationship with this young man. And we don't have any proof of this. It's just speculation to explain maybe why he was behaving oddly when he got home.
Well, and why she may feel compelled to ply him with alcohol and a vape, trying to be cool.
And why, I can understand taking your friend's kid along if you're going swimming or you're going to do something. I mean, there have been times my girlfriends have, entrusted me with their children, and it's not a big deal for me to say, hey, bring your son, we're going tubing or swimming, going to play mini golf, whatever, I'll take your child too. That's not so out of, out of reach for normal behavior. But at the same time, it is kind of weird that a 15-year-old would tag along with a 5-year-old. I mean, this is not people his age. It's not like the other boys are along. I don't know.
Well, I mean, like I said, if she was around him just a whole lot because they're, besties with his mom and all that, it wouldn't be that odd for him to rather be piddling around with them than doing nothing.
Right. I mean,
he may
I
be
get it.
bored. His mom may work, certain hours or something like that. So it could easily be very innocent. At the same time, it could be, a little odd.
Right. So I thought I would just bring all perspectives to the story. After dropping Hunter off at his house, Candace and Grandma take a video and a picture of Summer sleeping in the back seat, propped up on a couple of milk jugs. Which, that's not so unusual that you would take a picture of a kid being all cute, asleep, piled up on some milk in the back seat of a car, right?
Right.
I mean, kids will sleep anywhere, and sometimes they do get themselves into funny little positions. Now, the photo has circulated on social media, with many people weighing in that Summer's nail beds look purple, suggesting that perhaps she was deceased in the photo.
Oh, my God.
This photo was taken around 3:06 p.m. Now, when the family reaches their home, Candace called the boys out to help carry in the groceries. And from what I understand, Candace had left the boys home alone. They are 12, 10, and 8. All day while they've been out running errands, taking Grandma to the hospital. But what is disturbing, Dylan, is the way Candace described the boys were locked in the house and no one could come in or out of the home.
Locked in the house.
Right. So there have been a few reports where she said, oh, well, the boys were fine because they were locked in the house, but that seems very dangerous.
Well, that's
it's
not
like
okay.
A fire hazard.
Well, there's no way that's okay.
Right. So I don't know what's going on. But afterwards, the boys returned to the kitchen to watch television. It's around 5:30 p.m. Summer was at the family's home on Ben Hill Road in the community of Beach Creek. Again, from reports, this seems like a fairly rural area. Not a lot of people live up there. And it's the kind of place, Dylan, where, like, if you don't have business up there, then, like, why would you be there?
Oh, God.
It's kind of one of those rural roads that I don't think people just go down this road and get turned around. You know what I mean? This is like you have to kind of intentionally get out on this road.
What you want with that holler anyway? Right?
Well, yeah. Yeah, and some hollers you just stay out of.
It's true.
She was planting flowers with her mother and grandmother only about 20 feet away from the family home. Her grandmother, Candy, lived in a camper on the property, and they were gardening just by the grandma's camper trailer. After being rewarded with a piece of candy from her grandmother, Summer wanted to go inside the house where her brothers were watching television in the kitchen. When Summer joined the boys inside, Candace asked them to keep an eye on their sister. According to Candace, about 2 minutes later, after she helped adjust Grandma's knee brace, Candace returned to the house. The boys said Summer had wanted to play downstairs in the basement playroom. When Candace called out, Summer did not answer. At this point, Summer is nowhere to be found. Candace claims she walked around the home calling out for the child, but when she could not find her daughter, she called Don, freaking out. She informed Don that Summer was not at home. So he tells her, well, obviously you need to call 911. If our child is missing, common sense is then call for help.
Well, yeah, nobody should have to tell you that.
That's when Don packed up his tools and headed home, which was about a 45-minute drive because he's out in Jonesboro working. Candace immediately used her mother's phone to call 911, and she stated that she did this because they didn't have great reception at their house and that the grandmother's cell phone had better service to get out. Now, before law enforcement arrived, Candace walked to a neighbor's house to let them know that Summer was missing. According to family and friends, Summer was afraid to go in the woods around the property after being warned about the wildlife there. Dawn and Candace both have stated that there are snakes, coyotes, bears, pretty active in the area. Others report that if a stranger pulled into the driveway or someone that she didn't know that well, Summer would run up onto the porch, like very cautious around strangers at the family home.
So she's not going to go running toward them.
And most five-year-olds are going to be naturally kind of afraid of strangers and people they don't know.
I got to say, I was just, while you were talking there, I was looking at that photo of her on the milk cartons, and there seems to be quite a bit of analysis around that photo. And I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm tripping, but she is either very, very, very tired, which is possible. She's been playing all day, been cold, hot, and or I don't know. Have you looked at that photo?
Yeah, I've seen the photo.
What do you think? There's anything there? Or you think we're just playing in
Well, I
our
think people
minds?
are going to grasp at straws.
Right, because they're talking about bruise analysis or fingernails and all this, and that could be dirt, that could be a shadow, that could be anything. I mean, it's a kid who's been playing all day.
Well, it's a little kid who lives out
Right. Who, yeah.
in the woods. The little country kid
Right.
got 3 older brothers. Has been described as a tomboy. Probably out damn digging in the dirt with them hands and who knows what, because
Right.
that's what little kids do. At least normal little kids that get to get outside.
Well, I think sometimes when a case has so much exposure online, especially, people get carried away with
Absolutely.
with the armchair quarterbacking
Well,
and
and I
analysis.
think people have good intentions because they are concerned and they really want to help find this child. People are very invested in Summer's story. But at some point, people can get really carried away and it can cause problems. And we're going to talk about some of that later on, Dylan. Candace then sent her boys down through the creek on the property with a walkie-talkie and a buck knife so they could help look for their sister. She then got into her mom's truck and claimed she drove down the road but still found no signs of her daughter. As she was, quote, coming out of the holler, law enforcement was entering the family driveway. According to reports, the Wells had 3 vehicles. So Grandma has a truck, Don has a work truck that he used for his drywall business, and Candace had a brand new red Subaru that has a GPS Starlink system in it. Don had driven that car to work, and when asked why he would take the new car, he responded that he was paying $600 a month for it to sit in the driveway because apparently Candace, she didn't drive it.
So basically, I'll drive it if I want because I'm paying for it.
Right. But of course, people look for suspicious behavior and pointed to Don's use of the new car when he has this messy job as though it was some part of an elaborate plot. Like, well, he took the car so the GPS couldn't track Candace that day.
Well, I mean, it's possible, I guess, but
But he's like, no, he's like, I took the car because I'm paying a lot of money for this new car that rarely gets driven. And I thought to myself, why not drive my nice air-conditioned, this nice car to work?
yeah, for all we know,
Just goes.
he had a light day. He already had all his materials on site, and he was just finishing up a few little things. Wasn't going to have, drywall mud all over him, and he probably knew what he was doing. So.
Around 6:30 p.m., Summer was reported missing to the Hawkins County Sheriff's Office. Now, the first reports mentioned Summer went into the house around 6:10 p.m., but then Candace and Don said she went missing around 5:30. But it appears calls weren't made to 911 until around 6:23 p.m. So again, timeline not quite matching up, but I think in these situations, people can be confused, they're stressed out.
Well, I mean,
They're not great at estimating time. I mean, you're always telling me you'll be home in like 3 hours and then like 8 hours later you're still working. So I don't know.
Well, look, I mean, just sit down and write down exactly what you did yesterday with timestamps or what you think time it was when you did that. It's not easy.
It's not easy.
It's not easy because you're typically, unless you happen to be somewhere where you're staring at a clock, you're not constantly checking the time. And hours can get away from you.
Plus, it doesn't help that I'm like a pothead, so
Well, no.
I can't remember shit.
I'm like, what, man?
You asked me what I was doing yesterday. I'm like, well, before or after I was high as hell? Let's see.
Before gummy or after gummy? Because
Yeah,
after
it's
gummy,
just-
I don't know.
I mean,
what
I'll be
happened.
honest. My brain ain't what it was. But you know what? That's okay. I'm a self-medicator. Now, some folks have pointed out that the time frame doesn't match up. as it has been retold over the course of time.
So it's changing, it's evolving.
Well, it has changed because, again, we've got she went missing at 5:30, but then we have these initial reports that it was like 6:10 when she went missing, and we have phone calls from Candace to Dawn that support this later timeline, with Dawn saying call 911, and then Dawn's call went into 911 at like 6:23 p.m. And Candace's call went in around that same time, but they didn't actually get, I guess, a cop on the dispatch report till 6:30 to go out.
Okay.
So some reports are saying it was 6:30, but that's when I guess, dispatch went out to law enforcement that you need to get somebody to this household.
Right, because again, it's a rural area. If we call for assistance out in the country, we know around here it could be 45 minutes to an hour.
Right.
Before the sheriff
And
patrol
again,
can show
some people
up.
may be listening like, why do I care about what's a 30-minute difference? But I think it does matter when you are considering the rural nature of this home, where it's located, and it does open up the time frame, because there's a big difference in somebody having a 30-minute window to take a child versus somebody having like an hour and 20 minutes to snatch a child.
Well, yeah, that's a
Right?
huge difference.
Now, Summer had 3 older brothers, as I mentioned. They were aged 8, 10, and 12. Let's talk a little bit about the family. The family were regulars at the local Seventh-day Adventist church. Don Wells inherited this piece of property about 12 years earlier from his mother when she passed away. And since that time, Don had single-handedly built the family home. The property itself, including the house, Dylan, has been discussed in numerous news reports and has been fodder for the rumor mill because it is littered with debris, including old generators. There's a broken down school bus, some old junk cars on the property, rusted oil drums, scrap building materials, and there's several dilapidated outbuildings on the property. Inside the property, people have pointed out the fact that the inside of the house reflects the outside of the property. So if people think the inside or the outside of the house or, the property is in disarray, then when they see the inside of it, they're like, wow, there's not much difference because the inside is in disarray.
Well, and that doesn't surprise me. I think people's outside of their home typically reflects what's happening inside. Wouldn't you?
Yeah, maybe.
For the most part. Well, when you have a rural piece of property like this, there's no telling how long that stuff how many years had been accumulating.
Well, I think people are very critical of the property, but when I realized that Don had single-handedly built this home, I can see why people are like, oh, that house. But it's like, well, yeah, but he's one person. And if he's built this home, then you're going to have, maybe it's not going to be finished. You're going to have rooms that aren't quite, because like the basement, for example, looks like it's not quite finished.
Right.
You might have the wires, some exposed wiring, maybe ceiling panels missing, that kind of thing. And I think a lot of folks looked at this house and just thought, oh, this place is horrible. But I think some of it is unfinished construction that hasn't been completely taken care of.
And it could be a cost thing. It could be, waiting as
Slowly,
the money comes in.
as money comes in,
Yeah.
exactly. So I'm trying not to be too harsh about the home, though I will say it was a little rougher than I would want to live in, and that I would want to have my small children living in.
Well, yeah, when you have exposed, fiberglass insulation, things like that, I mean, that kind of sucks. So, let me check the house out.
It's not the most sanitary conditions either. But again, I mean...
Well, now dirty's dirty.
It's not my place to judge people's households, right? Now, the 2 older boys shared a room. I want to give you a little layout of the house here, which connected to the front door. So what you might think of as like a living room is where the 2 older boys had a bedroom. And their front door is going into the boys' room. That's a little strange. Then there's a door to the right that leads into what is like a kitchen area. They have tables and chairs, but they had no lounge furniture in the home. So there's no obvious living room area or like a comfortable seating area, couch, that kind of thing. It was just like table and chairs like you'd have in a kitchen setting. Then there's like a waist-high bar, which has this area where a stairwell, sort of ladder well, kind of goes down into the basement and where the bottom bedrooms are located. And to me, Dylan, it almost looked like a ladder well that you'd find on like a ship or something. And Candace even said like she has to sort of duck down under this wooden bar area to get down. I mean, it almost looks like a secret passageway or something.
Okay.
It's very strange. And I watched the interview room, and the gentleman goes down this stair area with the mom, and it's very odd for a house, especially for a home where you've got a family living.
Yeah. Now, so I'm looking at the exterior of the home. It's for the obviously we don't do video, so for the audio listeners, it's a very simple home, not very big. Obviously, it looks a way better job than I could do as far as if, you made this by yourself. It's setting on a block foundation that's about 8 feet high on one end and then kind of disappears almost into the ground on the other side. So I'm going to imagine that basement area, maybe a full basement area. If there are bedrooms down there, then I guess it about has to be because it's not a very big foundation. And it just looks like a simple, I would call it almost like a little mill house or just a simple little home. We see a lot of those here in our area, that oftentimes built by family members, for just the cost of materials. And you get this a lot of times up in these family land. You'll have grandma's house up here and then maybe a single wide trailer or another little house down here, and to have family living around each other. But in this case, it's basically this is the one home on the property. Is that right, Heather, or do we know?
That is, from what I can tell, is just the one home. We've got grandma's camper trailer.
Okay.
And then there are a few, like I mentioned, dilapidated outbuildings, shed type of buildings on the property.
Yes, grandma's camper trailer is actually set up next to the home. Okay. So, Heather, yeah, I hope that was an okay description.
Yes. Okay, so this is like a rough... this is a rough house.
900 square
you
feet.
Still got like cinder block, concrete, cinder blocks downstairs for the walls. You don't have the sheetrock up yet, that kind of thing. And it's funny to me that this gentleman, I'm not going to say funny, but I guess it's amusing to me that this gentleman does drywall, but he doesn't even have it done in his own house. But I was going to say, I've always heard jokes about like contractors, building folks, construction folks that can do these beautiful pieces of work like for other people, but then they neglect their own property. And my mom was married to a man who was a contractor, and she couldn't get him to do shit around the house. So I'm going to say that's, from what I understand, that might be accurate.
Well,
that their house is the last that they finish up.
Well, I think that's what happens is you go home after all day of doing that,
And you don't want to
you're
do it.
not so excited about doing it, even though it's your home.
Yes.
And I think, and again, it could be a monetary thing, and he was finishing projects as he continued to get money.
Well, yeah, it's expensive if you're trying to do that on your own. So the stairwell or ladder well area is pretty dark with loose wiring hanging. In the basement, there's a mattress where the parents sleep and an open area with no doorway entering into a room where Summer and her brother slept. And they all have mattresses on the floor, Dylan. They don't have beds, which some people have thought that was a bit improper, that everybody's just sort of sleeping on floor mattresses, the whole family. The basement door is located between the two areas where these bedrooms, and I use that word loosely, is. And this door to the basement is kind of odd, Dylan, because it has one-way glass where you can see outside, but no one can see inside the house.
That's a bit odd. That's a bit odd. And again, that could be leftover construction materials from another project he worked on. I'm not sure. I mean, there's nothing fancy about this house, okay? That's what makes me say that. That could have been a door because it's actually a pane of glass. Half the door's glass, and then it looks like a fairly solid door. That could have been left over from some other project. He got it for free because I don't know, because that's got to be an upgrade, right? If you're buying doors, I'm imagine that's a more expensive door. So I don't know. We don't know that he bought it. We don't know that he just came across it some other way and used it. So is that odd? Yes. But there could be hey, it was, some guy was building a house, didn't like that door. He gave me that door.
By midnight, an endangered child report was issued by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. And by 11 a.m. the following morning, the TBI entered an Amber Alert for summer. Amber Alerts are issued for the most serious missing children's cases. Investigators had hoped they would get solid leads within the first 24 hours of the Amber Alert. But the day ended with frustration and disappointment. The TBI would state that this case was well outside what they considered the norm, with limited clues and all possibilities being explored.
Just looking where this house is at, it's not easy to access. I mean, this piece of property is not near any major road that I can tell. It's off by itself. Looks like, long drives and to get to it and all that. So just the idea at first, and how many times is it ever truly the case that some child predator stranger snatches this kid? Very rarely. I think there was a case in Florida where a girl was literally taken out the window, and it was a guy
Polly Klaas,
2 or 3
which
houses
is a very
over.
famous kidnapping case out of California. She was abducted from her bedroom in the middle of a sleepover when there were other little girls in the bedroom with her. But this guy was able to take her out the window, and
he really did.
He did.
Yeah, and
so it's not unimaginable that this could happen, but
9 out of 10 times.
But the probability of it is pretty low, I would say. And we're going to talk more about that, Dylan.
Well, it's just to be so by itself and in the woods and all that, it's just not somewhere a stranger is going to come take someone. I mean, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. But let's carry on and we'll get to more of that. So immediately a search was launched for the little girl who was 4 feet tall with blonde hair, wearing a pink shirt and gray pants. The massive ground search would cover steep terrain, proving very dangerous with dense canopy cover, making the process slow and difficult. Because with this dense canopy cover, you can't use drones, you can't get the helicopters out, and you've also got, if the canopy cover's dense, then that means it's a heavily forested area, lots of woods, and it is rough terrain. I mean, it looks like it's kind of steep, mountainous, rugged, and you got all these searchers out, and they have to be on foot. It's hard for them to be able to use ATVs and stuff in this area. So it is a troubling search, Dylan. They had poor cell phone service. It made it difficult for searchers among the various agencies because you had like the rescue squad out there, sheriff's office. Then you get the TBI out there, and they can't even communicate about the different areas and what they found because the cell phone service sucks.
This sounds like everything you would not want on a search. And when you get in the deep woods, short of being on a path, an obvious path that's been cleared and walked a lot, it very quickly gets hard to traverse. I mean, you're walking in like years and years of leaf fall and dead, rotting leaves.
Growth, tall grass, shrubbery, bushes, trees, down trees.
I've done I spent many a day in the deep woods as a child, just playing, carrying on.
Same.
But it's much akin to deep snow, wading through some of these areas. So I could imagine it's very tough, and then they have no communication. They can't use a lot of their tools that help a lot in these situations. So they're just they're doing the best they can, and I'm sure it's very slow going.
By June 17th, the search included about 100 people and spanned a 1-mile radius around the Wells property. Soon, nearly 41 agencies had joined the search for summer, bringing the number of volunteers to cover about 1,000-acre area.
So here you have all the agencies, everything, all the resources being thrown at this.
I'm sorry, about 1,000 covering an acre area.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Jesus.
But I mean, they are bringing in tons of people, but they're only able to search like little bits at a time because of this. The terrain is so fucked up, right? So I'm sorry, I read that wrong. So by the evening of the 17th, investigators began asking anyone who lived in the area of Ben Hill Road to check their trail cameras, any surveillance footage they might have, and of course outbuildings for any sign of the little girl. Because, possibly she wandered off. Maybe she went in somebody's barn or shed to take cover, or she's scared, it's getting dark, that kind of thing. Now, around this time, Don Wells, Summer's father, spoke with media outlets for the first time. He was at work on the day Summer went missing, and he said, quote, "She would have never left there on her own. Somebody has taken her." One of the first few interviews featured both Dawn and Candace, and they were asked about the little girl's shaved head. Now, most of the pictures that we've seen of Summer, she has shoulder length, like a little blonde bob. But there are a few pictures that have surfaced where she had a shaved head. And so they're asking about that. It's the most recent photos when Summer has a buzz cut.
Yeah, even in the milk photo, we'll call it.
Yes.
That's been so scrutinized. Her hair's grown out a little bit, but you can tell it was buzzed.
Yeah, she got a little burr head.
Yeah, a little burr-headed thing.
Now, Candace and Dawn both inadvertently danced around the questions, both kind of bumbling with different answers about how the child came to have her head shaved. Dawn said at first that it's because she wanted to look like her brothers.
Okay.
They all have shaved heads. She wanted a shaved head. At another time, Dawn says that Candace shaved her head, and then Summer wanted to do it too because she wanted to be like her mom. But then they offer up another explanation about this, that Summer had sort of tried to shave her own hair and had given herself a little kid haircut and screwed up the back of the hair, and that they had to shave her head to fix it because it was such a disaster. And that Candace also shaved her head to sort of be in solidarity with Summer so the little girl wouldn't feel bad about this self-haircut.
Okay, see, any of those could happen. I've heard of, an example of almost all those, especially the kid haircut.
Well, I know one time my daughter cut a chunk of the left side of her hair, right at the front, cut this big old piece out, and she looked weird because she had this big old shaved chunk of hair, and then the rest was long, and it took a minute for that to grow back in, but we didn't cut her hair off. We just let that kind of grow in, and she learned to sort of wear headbands to cover that one side of
put
her
your bow on,
head
honey.
for a few months until it got long enough to tuck behind her ear.
But the thing, like I said, I've heard an example of all those. Very probable, not weird. But the problem is you don't remember exactly why. Because you're going to remember if whatever those stories you just said is the truth, you're going to know exactly. Well, she wanted to look like her brother. She cut her own hair. You're not going to have to wonder about it. You're not going to keep changing the details of why is her head been shaved. So that's very odd to me.
Well, some people out in the world on the interwebs, Dylan, have suggested maybe more sinister reasons for shaving her head.
Yes.
Like it could be some kind of punishment. Or some people who think maybe Don had an inappropriate relationship with his daughter, which that's been suggested. There's no proof. I'm not saying he's done anything to this little girl. But some people were like, oh, well, maybe mom shaved her head so he wouldn't be interested in her.
Oh, so, come on, guys.
It's, again, pulling at straws.
I'm not saying that's impossible, but come on. Geez. Maybe if I shave her, of course, there is probably some sick piece of shit out there that's actually thought this. But, they're just, it's just pure speculation. And it gets a little bit goofy.
It does.
And it doesn't help. It really
no, it's not helpful.
Clogs the water.
And honestly, people are like, oh, this guy's a piece of shit. You know what? Of all the family members, he's the one that I think I get the least weird vibes from. When I've seen him in interviews, he's the only one that seems to me to kind of have emotion and
a little bit of sense.
Maybe. So I don't know. A lot of people are like, oh, he gives me a bad vibe. He's actually the one family member that I feel like maybe isn't lying. So Don then suggested in the first interviews that he thought the family was being stalked. He said Summer would never wander off the property and that the little girl was in a vulnerable situation in which a person was able to snatch her from the basement when Summer went down to play.
Okay.
Now, according to the family, someone had been on the property and had stolen items in the past. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation's dogs tracked the child sent to the back door of this house, which is in the basement, to the end of the trail that led down to Ben Hill Road, because there is a trail through the woods that goes down to the road from this property.
Really?
People were calling it a dog trail So I'm not sure if it's like the dogs or the family had used the trail, but there's some kind of trail behind the house. On June 22nd, a Kingsport man offers a $25,000 reward for information leading to Summers' discovery. Even with this large sum of money in the pot, no one came forward with valuable information. And by the 25th, investigators released a photo of a red or maroon-colored Toyota truck. They said a similar truck was seen in the area on the day of Summers' disappearance. Investigators thought the driver might be a witness in the case, but no details were ever released if this witness was located. They were able to speak to them. They weren't saying this person was like a suspect. They just thought if they were working in the area, they might have seen something.
Right.
Now, only 2 days later, the TBI announced they were scaling back search efforts. At a press conference, the TBI stated they had over 500 leads which they would be working. In July, the private firm EquiSearch Midwest came to Hawkins County to assist in the search for Summer. Now, if you're not familiar with EquiSearch, I'll give you a little detail about
I thought
them.
I remembered this.
Well, EquiSearch Midwest is a branch of the Texas EquiSearch, which we spoke about recently on a Patreon episode when we discussed for our movie club the Texas Killing Fields documentary, which was in Texas, and one of the victims' fathers started this Texas EquiSearch. And in the beginning, they were using horses to do search and rescue. But it's evolved over the years. This Midwest branch of search and rescue team started back in 2012. And their searches range from small groups to large groups, and they often use drones, ATVs, thermal imaging, and other advanced technology to help with the searches.
Like ground penetrating radar.
Yep. Sometimes canines and horseback teams are deployed during the searches, but they were unable to deploy the horseback teams because this area is so treacherous. EquiSearch prides itself on open communication with local law enforcement agencies, and they did work closely with the Hawkins County Sheriff's Office in recovery efforts. Yet, despite the search, nothing was found in regards to Summer Wells. So by now, more than 1,000 leads had poured in to Hawkins County. The Wells family received another devastating blow on July 26th. Child Protective Services stepped in and removed Summer's 3 brothers from the home. According to reports, Don Wells had begun drinking after Summer's disappearance. The combination of a missing child and rumors swirling about the family's possible involvement led the state agency to take the boys, according to the Wells. Don Wells told the press, quote, "It's probably better for them." Don appeared on a podcast, J is for Justice, telling the host, Jennifer Youngblood, quote, "They come at me and said, either posing, said the inside scoop with the TBI, and that they knew that I sold my daughter for drugs, and I flipped out." So, it's kind of an odd statement. I flipped out. So he goes on to say that these rumors caused him to drink excessively, and that's why the kids were taken away. Don said he didn't believe it was safe at his house, especially after Summer's disappearance. People began showing up on the property, from internet sleuths to psychics. Some of these amateur detectives showed up at the Wells home in the middle of the night.
See, that's
and
not...
he's having to, go out in the middle of the night and run strangers off from his home.
That's
and they're
crazy.
trying to video for YouTube and sneaking around.
Clickbait shit.
That's not okay.
That's totally inappropriate. Like with EquiSearch, they don't compete with authorities. They're much like that AquaSearch team that kind of had that guy who was a piece of shit on it.
Yeah, the pervert guy.
Yeah, but they don't compete. They're just there to help.
Right.
And a lot of times, sometimes the local law enforcement will, we don't need your help. You're amateurs, But I think EquiSearch has gotten a really good reputation of getting results and bringing in some really good resources to these searches. But some Joe Blow showing up, it's just like if me and you went there, like, hey, let's go there because we're near, or we can drive a few hours, and let's take some video and go knock on the door and ask people.
Well, he had kind of this weird quote, but I think he's also saying that some of these people showed up maybe pretending that they were with the TBI and accusing him of selling his daughter for drugs. And then turns out they're just
Some dicks on the
weird
internet.
people who show up at his house.
Yeah, that's
I
not
think
okay.
That's what he was trying to say, but it was worded very oddly. But it just seems like all these people start showing up on their property in the middle of the night at odd times. And that's not okay. I mean, you're trespassing.
Well, and if you know you
And
did,
you could possibly be like contaminating a crime scene. I mean, you have no right to just go to these people's houses.
and if you didn't do something to Summer, and you do think that someone took her, you're going to be concerned about someone coming back.
Well, yeah, you got 3 other kids in the house.
Right.
The sheriff agreed that misinformation circulated on the internet had at points hampered the investigation. Social media advice is, of course, creating a lot of unnecessary rumor, gossip. You got a lot of folks out there who are sort of like getting this misinformation, taking it seriously, thinking they can take justice into their own hands.
Oh God.
Showing up at somebody's house. I mean, that's not okay.
Well,
And-
all the bullshit.
And they were making suggestions to law enforcement, like trying to tell law enforcement how to do their job. And the sheriff is like, this is stuff we've already done many times. So again, you don't know everything that's happening in the investigation. So when you're throwing out, y'all should be doing this, this, and this, we've probably already done it. And we've probably done it multiple times. Like, you don't know all the details. You're not privy to all the information. So to get on there and act like we're not doing our job and we didn't do this or that, you don't even know what we've done.
Yeah, and this type of speculation leads to leads to a bunch of false tips.
Well, yeah, and you can end up with these like vigilantes who think
Well, and there's that.
there's, I mean, it can just not be a good situation.
But having 1,000 leads to run down, that's an
It's
enormous.
a lot.
That's so much manpower, so many resources to even try to take a look at every single one of those. Yeah.
So about a month after she's gone missing, Don speaks with this podcaster and with the news media, and he says, statistically speaking, Summer was likely deceased. He said, quote, "I'll see her in the resurrection." Wells said, quote, "I hate to think that. I love her with all my heart." A lot of people sort of misinterpreted this statement, but I understand what he's saying. I think it's not a bad thing to be realistic about the outcome, but it doesn't mean that he's lost hope. He's just being a reasonable person. I mean, of course, he loves his daughter, and I'm sure he wants her to come back home. But he's not being, I don't think that means he's guilty of something.
No.
I think just saying, my daughter's been missing for over a month, we have no idea where she is, the probability is, it's good possibility, that she's dead.
Well, yeah, if a child predator really did take her, statistically speaking, she has 8 to 12 hours to live
Yeah.
because that's how it goes.
But then people took that statement and ran with it. Like, oh, well, that's because they've done something to her. They know she's dead.
We'll never see her
it's-
again is what we're feeling. The only reason I'm saying that is because I know what happened to her.
Right.
Not that it's already been a month. She's a kid. She's 5. There's no signs. There've been 1,000 people here searching whatever piece of equipment you could think of. All these state agencies, private agencies, all these volunteers. I mean, I wouldn't have much hope left after a month. Honestly.
Yeah, it would be really hard. And we're not in this man's shoes. We don't know what he's feeling. We can only imagine if something this horrible happened to us, how we would react and how we would feel. But again, people are going to scrutinize anything this family does. Don and Candace maintain their statements and belief that Summer was lured away by a stranger. Authorities, however, have not labeled the case as an abduction, and they are exploring all options. In a newspaper interview, Don suggested someone might have been, quote, hiding in the weeds, waiting for her to go into the basement. He said his belief was confirmed when police dogs picked up her scent in the backyard and followed it through the woods and reached the end of the road. According to Don, they had suspected previous prowlers up around the property at night, but never anyone in the daytime like when Summer was missing. He said, quote, "They came from the dog trail in the woods. The dog they used, that's where the scent took them." So he's talking about the canines, the searcher canines. Went down this dog trail, and that's where the scent took them, was down this trail, through the woods. He said not the driveway.
Now, that's interesting that her last scent, or I guess strongest scent they could pick up, went that way. But I'm curious if the family ever walks on that dog trail as well. You know,
Possibly.
if there was a trail that led down to the road by my house, I would be likely to take it, walk through the woods.
Don told the media that he had put his faith in God. He said, quote, "The police can't come up with anything. All these people on Facebook all over the world can't come up with anything. Nobody can. Only God can." 2 months, I should mention this, 2 months before Summer's disappearance on April 21st, Candace asked that charges be dropped against her husband, Don. Both Don and Candace have previous criminal records. In 2020, Don was arrested on domestic assault charges. It was on October 14th of 2020 that deputies were dispatched to the Ben Hill Road address after receiving reports of a domestic assault. Don Wells was located behind the wheel of a car when they arrived at the house. A stop was conducted in the driveway in which Wells was detained. He was stumbling and had a strong odor of alcohol. During this incident, Wells admitted to having a criminal record in Utah, along with possessing a black powder pistol, which was in the vehicle. Candace told officers that Don Wells had came home drunk and that there was someone else in the house, another male, and that he believed she was cheating on him. Allegedly, Don began arguing with the person in the house, which ended in a struggle between the couple. Documents say Candace Bly was pushed down and injured her left knee. She and other witnesses reported Don began punching himself in the face before leaving the house.
Okay.
Wells was taken into custody. So the following day, Candace filed for an order of protection against Don Wells. In the paperwork, she wrote, quote, "I'm afraid for my children and myself. My mother fears he is going to hurt her because she is staying in her camper on our property." 4 days later, on October 19th, which was the date of the hearing, Candace asked that those charges be dropped, but they were not dropped until the hearing in April. Now, at the time, Don had been working, and this is the fall of 2020. At that time, Don had been working in Park City, Utah. And this is his version of what happened. He called Candace from his sister's home during a party. Don believes that Candace heard his sister laughing in the background and that she assumed Don was cheating with another woman.
Okay.
They exchanged words, and Candace was attempting to make him jealous. Like, well, if you're screwing around, I can do the same. So she's making these threats.
And he's out of town working.
Yes.
Is that right?
So, of course, Don, this upsets him greatly. He immediately drives from Utah to Tennessee to straighten things out with his wife. And when he arrives at home, he finds Candace inside their home with another man.
Now, that's a good...
And I won't give the man's name away, but his name was Jose. And I just wanted to say it because I love the name Jose.
So Utah to Tennessee is not a small drive.
No.
That's across the country, basically.
That's got to take at least 2 days, I would guess.
So and when he gets home, he claims there's another man in his home that she's making good on her threats.
Yeah, there's another man. Jose is in the home with Candace.
I don't usually cheat on a man with his wife, but when I do it with Candace.
Oh, you sound like a Scarface.
Yeah, no, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Cockroach.
Okay, so
I was trying to be the most interesting man.
So he
in the
walks
world.
in. He's been drinking. He finds his wife with another man in the house. They have a row, right?
It was a big old row.
They have a row over this, in which Candace at some point gets her knee injured, calls police. But after they were both able to calm down, they realize it was a miscommunication and they resolve it. And they are going to stay together.
Jose, we're going to have to ask you to leave.
This is what dysfunctional people do, Dylan.
Your services.
And you know this. You've grown up in dysfunction. I've grown up in dysfunction. Yes. We know how these types of relationships work. And the victims in all of this are the poor kids who have to endure the back and forth from their crazy-ass mom and daddy, right?
Yeah, because the kids are just along for the ride.
I can attest.
And they're sponges. They're soaking up all this energy, be it positive or negative, and all this shit. You know, people think their kids aren't aware of things that might be going on, like they're hiding it from them good. And oftentimes you're not. The kids still know. They still get an idea of what's happening just from the vibes. Kids are like little tuning forks. They really are. Because I think at that age, your mind hasn't been calcified by life. And I think you're a little more open to vibes and energy and stuff.
On April 21st of 2021, Don Wells pleaded guilty to possession of a handgun while intoxicated. Wells then went on to tell the press that he and Candace weren't on the same page when this happened. He was in Utah and they had these miscommunications. Back in August of 2001, Wells was wanted in Utah for a parole violation and considered a fugitive from justice. And he was found hiding in a storage room and taken into custody on this Tennessee property. So again, they both have criminal histories, and we'll get into more of that at the end of the episode. Don Wells addressed the arrest along with his criminal history and his son's status as a convicted sex offender in interviews. In Utah, Don was incarcerated for third-degree felonies for theft, burglary, and forgery, a second-degree felony theft for receiving stolen property, and a misdemeanor for having a suspension or revoked license. He was released from prison in 1995 and was discharged from supervision back in 2003. So it seems like in that time period from 2003 up until he got this domestic violence charge, like he pretty much stayed out of trouble in that time frame. Donald Wesley Wells Jr., Don's 34-year-old son, pled guilty to sexual indecency with a child in Arkansas in 2007. Many have questioned the conviction and wondered if Summer's half-brother could be involved in her disappearance. Although he had an alibi, he was in Utah at the time that Summer was taken. Wells said his son's offense in Arkansas would not have been the same in Tennessee, that it would have been considered like a statutory rape charge. His son was 19 years old at the time and dating a girl who was 18 months younger than him. Don said when he informed his son that Summer was missing, the boy cried like a baby. So he is adamantly denying that his older son had anything to do with Summer's disappearance, and that this being a sex offender
was him dating a girl a year and a half younger than him when he's
not
19.
as sinister as people have made it out to be on the internet. She was 17, about to be 18, and his son was 19 when he was dating this young woman.
17 and a half to 19. I mean, that's, yeah. I mean, I think that's okay.
Well, it's not. The difference is, Dylan, when you have people on the internet like this guy's a child predator and he's a pervert and he's a pedophile, my automatic thought was, oh my gosh, this 19-year-old, he did something to a little kid. I'm thinking little kid, like 3, 4.
Or
right?
rape.
Or 12 or something like that. But then when I'm hearing, okay, his girlfriend's like 17, he's 19, that's an 18-month difference. I mean,
that's quite different.
I would have to say, in my household, I would not be trying to press charges against a 19-year-old. Because I would think that's not such a huge age difference. And back in the day when we were in school, I knew plenty of 17-year-olds who dated 19-year-olds, and nobody batted an eye about it. Is it right or wrong? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But I do think it makes a difference when you find out that this quote-unquote victim was a 17-year-old girl that he was dating.
Right. I agree.
And in a relationship with.
It's quite different.
Yeah. So I think these folks who've turned it and twisted it into something more sinister on the internet don't have the full details. Because, yeah, it doesn't sound like, once Dawn explains it, it's like, okay, well, it doesn't sound as bad as the internet has made it out to be, right?
No, and it seems the internet in this case is doing very, not really helping with all their
They're doing more
sleuthering.
harm than good.
Yes, that's what it seems.
Another twist in the Summer Wells story, Dylan, involves Candace's sister, Rose Marie Bly. Born September 16th of 1987 to Candace Harrer, she grew up in Grantsburg, Wisconsin. Now, according to her mother, Grandis, Rose loved children and wanted to someday become a children's author. She attended Grantsburg High School, then moved to St. Croix Falls after graduation. And that's about a half an hour drive from her hometown in Wisconsin. Rosa gave birth after high school and would have another daughter with her boyfriend. The pair would be married in February of 2009. The relationship between Rose and her husband, Christopher Larson, was strained at times. They were young, they were parents to 2 small children, and of course, money was often tight. Now, at times, the marriage was incredibly rocky, including bouts of domestic violence. In summer of 2009, Rose was arrested and charged with domestic violence. In July, she went to court and pled not guilty. Christopher, her husband, filed for divorce, but then the couple tried to reconcile in August of 2009. On August 19th, Rose spoke to her mother, Candace. During their conversation, now if you remember, this Candace is the grandest.
Right.
So this is Candace's sister. This is the grandest's other daughter. During their conversation, Rose complained of a headache. She admitted to her mother that she had fallen off a horse a few days before, and her mother, Candace, urged her daughter to see a doctor, as any mom would. If you fall off a horse, your head hurts, you should probably go to the doctor.
Hey, my head hurts and I can't see.
2 days later, on August 21st, Rose told her husband Christopher that she was going to Cushing, a nearby town, to meet her cousin for a little while. Christopher said he didn't think much of it, didn't seem out of the ordinary. He waited up for a while, ended up falling asleep, and that it wasn't until the next morning he realized that Rose had not made it back to their home. He started calling people asking if they had seen or heard from Rose, but no one had. On August 22nd, Christopher reports his wife missing. When law enforcement reached out to her cousin, they were surprised to find out that Rose had no plans to meet up with this cousin.
Oh.
Investigators weren't sure if Christopher had lied or if Rose had tried to cover her tracks by making up this story, like she had some other plans in mind. Investigators began questioning family and friends, but they had no real leads. Then about 5 days later, Rose's car was located at a parking lot in Grantsburg. The area was familiar to Rose because she had grown up in that town, but this lot was kind of known as a place where long-haul truckers would park their trucks and trailers, this parking lot. The 2001 Pontiac Grand Am was searched thoroughly, but nothing was found inside. Not even fingerprints, which is odd. It's almost as if someone had wiped it down.
I feel like it would have to be wiped down to have no fingerprints. I'm sure our car's full of fingerprints.
Over the next few months, investigators would conduct searches. They would look through electronic devices. They would subpoena cell phone records, but they found nothing. They couldn't find anything out of the ordinary in this case. And eventually the file was sent off to the FBI's missing person unit. But again, they weren't really able to come up with any leads.
I mean, is it possible that there was some creep going up down this trail that does lead to a road and caught wind that this little girl lives in this house that you can see from the trail? I mean, it's possible, right? I mean,
yeah,
it seems improbable, and oftentimes it's not that. But I mean, they've went through these people's backgrounds and raked over them multiple times. I mean, even, the FBI, and they can't find anything that's incriminating. So, I mean, what do you think about this after having done this deep dive and,
Well, I'm not finished talking about the missing aunt. So
okay, I'm sorry.
You're getting way ahead. We're not even talking about that right now. We're talking about this. So focus your attention.
Yes,
you
ma'am.
making eye contact? You focusing?
Well, about that, I would know you're not there all night because I couldn't sleep without my baby.
Well, after Rose was missing for some months, Christopher filed for divorce and sole custody of their daughters. Police stated that he was given a polygraph and passed it, although we know polygraph is a little bit of a junk science. It was suggested that Christopher was advised to obtain full custody of the children in case his wife showed back up. But others say it's the action of a guilty husband. And others just think it's a legal precaution to protect himself and the children. Rose had an active warrant at the time of her disappearance. And though Rose was described as an excellent mother, people who knew her best don't believe that she would skip out on criminal court just to avoid getting into some minor trouble.
Yeah, leave your family forever and go on the run from henceforth.
So today, Rose is still missing. Her case was getting little attention until the disappearance of Summer became newsworthy. And then Rose's case has gotten some renewed interest. Some wonder if it's coincidental or if the two cases have a connection. I mean, what are the odds of two family members going missing?
I got to figure they're astronomical. I mean, honestly.
Well, in October of 2021, Don Wells was charged with a DUI. A few weeks later, Dawn and Candace appear on the Dr. Phil show to discuss Summer's disappearance. Dr. Phil, in his expert wisdom, and I use that loosely,
Yeah, he's a doctor because Oprah said so.
states that he does not believe Candace or Dawn are involved in the child's disappearance, but noted how upset Candace became when Dr. Phil mentioned the cornbread mafia. At some
Okay.
point, Dr. Phil asks them, do you think this cornbread mafia could have had something to do with Summer's disappearance? Now, the group is I guess, a loosely organized crime syndicate in the South and Appalachia that has been nicknamed the Cornbread Mafia.
Yeah,
Seem
people
to
are
be heavily involved in the drug trade.
people hear that name and I think it makes you chuckle, but these really are bad people. The cornbread mafia is real, and it's just as bad as any other criminal organization.
Is that why you have that cornbread tattooed on your chest? Because you were like a former gang member
Yeah.
and now you're out living a secret life?
Yeah, when I get the pat of butter added to it, it means I done killed a bitch.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
Well, I pour mine in some milk. Now, at this mention, when Dr. Phil says, do you think it could be some organized crime group?
Like the cornbread mafia?
Yeah. Candace loses her shit. Now, I watched this interview, and she's very, she just seems kind of aloof and just answering yes, no, like not giving a lot of detail to this interview. It's a very strange interview. Like, why would you go on the show and then not really
Want to participate?
discuss what's the issue at hand? But
Now,
she doesn't.
Does she freak out?
She becomes visibly upset, Dylan. She ends up removing her microphones and leaves the set in obvious distress.
At the mere mention of the
Yeah.
a criminal organization or something like the cornbread mafia.
Yes.
Really?
Now, the two-part segment featured body language experts, Greg Hartley and Scott Rouse. Now, they're in the second part of this. They have the two-segment episode. And they largely agree with Dr. Phil's conclusions that Candace and Donald didn't have anything to do with their daughter's death, that kind of thing. But Dr. Phil did state he thought Candace was not being entirely truthful. And when he pressed her about what happened to the girl, Candace denied any knowledge, saying, quote, I don't know. In addition, Dr. Phil asked what would happen or what should happen to the person who took Summer. And after a pause, Candace said they should be put away for the rest of their lives. But the experts agreed there was a pause and that most people would typically be more reactive with descriptions and would be a little bit more graphic with their reply, because Dr. Phil immediately gives the example, well, if this was my daughter, I'd want to be alone in a room with this person for 10 seconds. And the body language experts are agreeing that Dr. Phil's response seems to be much more genuine and how someone would react than just, well, they should be put away for a long time.
Well, yeah, but I mean, when you get down to stuff like that, people react differently. They have, very different personalities.
They do, but I would urge folks who are interested in
I'm gonna watch
more to go check out this interview. It's telling, in my opinion. I just think folks should watch it, and you could draw your own conclusions from it.
Well, and to be devil's advocate, she could just know someone who's into some crime and claims to be in the cornbread mafia, and she might be freaked out about it even being connected to her.
Candace would later say that she had no idea who the cornbread mafia was, but that it sounded, quote, horrible. A criminal expert named Eric Stanton from Northwest State Community College said, quote, we don't know what the triggering effect is. This is talking about when Candace hears the cornbread mafia and starts freaking out. He says, we don't know what the triggering effect is. It could have just triggered her for something else and not necessarily her involvement or possible involvement with the abduction and disappearance. The reaction, Dr. Phil stated, could be from fear, guilt, or a mix of the two. But after mentioning the mafia, Don does admit that he believed they may have been targeted by criminals because at some point he had mechanical tools stolen. So Don didn't think it was so far-fetched that some criminal organization could be involved.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I get it. I mean, if you really have had people picking around your buildings or taking stuff off your property, I mean, is that something that's being pushed by the cornbread mob. I need this guy's screwdriver.
Well, Dr. Phil reiterates several times during the episode that in many cases similar to Summers, a person who takes the missing victim is usually not a complete stranger, and that it's often a family member or a friend or someone who is known to the family. Dr. Phil believes when this case is solved, the person involved in Summers' disappearance will be a person known to the family and not a stranger.
See, when I was saying, is it possible some weirdo just happened to be up this path and see this little girl and say make some plan to snatch her? Possible, but improbable. But quite a bit more likely if someone outside of the parents in this household took her. They knew of the girl, they knew of the house, they knew the path gave you access from the road. So yeah, I think that would be much more likely than just some monster out driving around happens to come across Summer playing.
I will say, Dylan, that the experts who were on the show noted that Dr. Phil never suggested that Dawn or Candace were not involved in introducing Summer into trafficking or anything of that nature. That Dr. Phil only said that he didn't think they hurt or killed Summer. So the experts are saying, well, yeah, Dr. Phil, you've said they didn't hurt or kill the child, but you haven't come out and said that they weren't involved in trafficking her.
Okay.
But which leads me to think maybe the experts who do this body language and analyze what you say and whatever seem to have some feeling that that could be a possibility.
So instead of saying something like a blanket statement like they had nothing to do with her being harmed, or they didn't do anything that endangered her or led to her death, he's not being very specific in that matter. Is that what I'm getting out of that? At the same time, I don't know that it could just be the way he said it. It couldn't have, every syllable doesn't have to have intent behind it. You know what I mean?
Well, after the Dr. Phil interview in 2021, Candace has refused to sit down with reporters. She has said that interview made her feel like she was being interrogated and that she didn't want to do further interviews.
Okay.
Since Summer's disappearance, Dawn has stressed that the public's reaction has been hard for their family. Candace has been yelled at in grocery stores, called baby killer by strangers. I mean, that's pretty rough.
Well, it's terrible. It's horrible if you didn't do anything to your child, especially. I mean,
this woman, as far as we know, is very traumatized by her missing child. The taking of her child. And then for people to yell that at her is pretty terrible. Others approached John at work, demanding to speak with him, harassing him on the job, and he actually had to leave the state where he was working because he was being so harassed by random people.
That's totally inappropriate. I get emotions run high when there's a little child like this involved. But, some people go way too far. You've told stories before of someone who's been accused of something, but later, found not guilty or whatever, cleared, but they still have to deal with this type of stuff. Oftentimes they have to move completely away to a new area where people don't know their face and don't connect them to this case.
Well, that's what's happened, Dylan. We're going to get to that. So Don Wells, with that gun charge, was sentenced to 11 months. I know I've skipped around a little bit, but
that's fine.
He was sentenced to 11 months and 29 days in jail with a possibility of probation in 180 days. And he was also ordered to attend a 28-day alcohol rehab. Now, the couple, without their sons, have moved to Arkansas, where they were living in a motel for a while, and Don had gotten a new job down there. And now the couple is talking about how they might like to buy a home in the area where they're living. Now, Don and Candace have since hired a private investigator to work Summer's case. Don hasn't learned anything new from law enforcement, but maintains his beliefs that Summer was abducted from the family's property. Sheriff Lawson maintains that the Hawkins County Sheriff's Office isn't ruling out any possibility, stating, quote, "Nothing pointing to abduction, nothing pointing to foul play, other than her walking outside the house and not being found." One of the strangest parts of this case is that the Wells had 13 dogs on the property at the time of Summer's disappearance.
Okay. I think that just totally takes strange man from the wood path out.
Well, let's talk about this, Dylan.
Because I've had 3 or 4 dogs, yard dogs around the home, and you can't get within damn 100 yards of that home without me knowing it.
We have one tiny dog, and he will let us know when people are walking down the sidewalk.
Well, it's true. I mean, just the one little yapper, and we know if anyone even comes anywhere near.
He alerts me every morning when his enemy, the mailman, shows up.
Oh, my God.
Rufus is against capitalism. He is anti-capitalist. When bills arrive, he gets very angry. He does not like the mailman. He does not want you to bring that ish up in this house.
He doesn't.
He does not want to have to pay a light bill.
He does not want to return to sender. No. Ever.
No, he's very angry about the mailman. And so he will let you know if someone is around.
I actually agree with him because very little good news comes through my mail.
It's true. So the Wells have stated that these are not dogs owned by their family, but strays who've packed up in the area. 2 litters of puppies were found at the same time as Summer's disappearance, including a set that was located in a crawl space by the basement door, where she would have maybe been taken from. As Chris McDonough of the interview room drove away from the property, you can hear the dogs barking on that YouTube video. The dogs also caused issues during the search, specifically with the canine dogs and the cadaver dogs that were brought in. It has been brought up by several folks, like, how did these dogs not bark at a stranger/kidnapper?
Yeah. I mean, seriously. How does that work? And even if they are strays packed up and just happen to be living near your home, which there's ones whelping a litter of pups inside your structure you live in, it's hard to not notice, right?
But these aren't my dogs, but I do
right.
have a litter
But there's
of
a
puppies that were birthed in the crawl space by my basement door.
Right.
Okay.
But even if they are just strays that packed up, they're even more territorial, and they're like literally going on patrols and alerts. And I mean, these are how animals act. And so, yeah, someone's creeping around, stealing shit, and kids included, and none of the dogs make anyone aware. I find that hard to believe.
Now, 2 years later, there has been no real update in the case of missing Summer Wells, but theories have surfaced. So, Dylan, I know you were excited to talk about this. Let's talk about some of the theories, because you were just trying to get way ahead a few minutes ago.
I'm sorry,
now we can talk about it, because
Okay.
I know how your little brain works.
Yeah.
So here are some of the theories that have been floated in the true crime community, okay? Summer wandered off. She's a 5-year-old, she's barefoot, and she might have taken off into the woods and gotten lost on this rugged terrain. But of course, searchers are unable to locate her. So some people think, well, she's a little kid. If she wandered off into that dense wooded area, anything could have happened to her. She could have been injured. She could have fell in a hole. Who knows, right?
It's possible.
So it's not completely unrealistic that people go in the woods and vanish completely all the time. Look at the Missing 411 series that covers many a person who's gone into the woods, never come out. You never see a fucking trace of them.
All ages, all walks of life.
Yeah. But then others are like, this was a little barefoot child, and she probably couldn't have got too far because of the rugged terrain.
Well, my first thought was, no matter where she wandered, she is just a barefoot 5-year-old kid. I couldn't imagine how deep into this thick brush and such she could get when there's such an active search. That's a lot of people working an acre, even if it is hard to search, mountainside, whatever. A good half of that property, I would say, was open. So a half acre, you're really having trouble with. That's still a lot of people and a lot of resources on one area. I hate to think that little girl be anywhere near the house there, having succumbed to the elements or anything like that, or gotten hurt, injured, where she couldn't get back home. I hate to think that she would be that hidden. Now, some kind of a natural crevasse or old wellhead or something like that. That very possible. Could be something, a shaft of some sort that no one's aware of. Then the location of was lost years ago.
Well, people talk about underground cave systems
yeah.
a lot with these disappearances,
right?
And that could be linked. And who knows? Possibly, could be true. I don't know.
Her being tiny, she slides down some 50-foot shaft into some weird underground cavern or cave. You're never ever going to find her. I mean, really.
An animal attack also has been suggested, but in my opinion, that seems unlikely because searchers made no discovery. They didn't find any evidence of a ripped shirt or pants or blood or
Blood.
anything.
Yeah.
Even using tracking dogs.
Yeah,
So I don't buy that theory.
I don't think that one holds any water. I think possibly slipped into a cave or hole or something has more possibility than the animal attack. Because you're just going to see signs of that. And most animals eat and leave. You're going to find some kind of remains. They typically don't eat all of whatever they
Right.
killed. And very few of them take it off with them. Very few animals do that. Some do. Bears are known to bury things and come back to them later. But yeah, I don't know about the animal attack.
Others speculate that she might have drowned at that swimming hole earlier in the day, or that perhaps she died in the truck on her way back to the house. Because if you remember, Hunter said during the swimming that she went underwater for a few seconds and that he pulled her out. So some people think, okay, well, it might not have affected her immediately, but perhaps she got into the truck and passed away.
Yeah, you can. That's why oftentimes they will make you go to the hospital anyway if you've had some kind of an event in the water and swallowed some. They know you've swallowed some into your lungs. You can have a reaction later that actually is like a slow drowning.
So some people think that she might have died in the truck and that Candace and Grandma panicked, maybe set this photo up to be like, oh, look, no, we had her. She was fine. And then got rid of the child's body somewhere between the swimming hole and the house. And that could explain why this boy came home and seemed a little bit traumatized to his mom. I mean, his mom has come out and said, I'm not against the possibility that might have happened, that maybe he saw something. I mean, he's never admitted it, but...
Okay. I mean, he's just going to live with that and never ever come out with it after all this time. I guess that's possible.
Yet others suggest that this couldn't have happened because the cadaver dogs didn't pick up any scent of death in the truck or at the house. But if it was just a matter of a minute or two, I'm not sure.
I mean, how much decomposition smell is there going to be?
Well, that's what I'm not sure about. So, I mean, it's maybe possible, but who knows? Abduction by someone known to the family. Now, the dogs might be more familiar with this person and not bark. Yet the boys were home that day, and a predator would have likely had to hide for some hours before being able to take the little girl, because this predator wouldn't know the family's schedule.
No.
And Summer's not home, and so they would have had to wait until she came back to snatch her. So what is the likelihood that some abductor is going to wait, as Don said, in the weeds
For hours
to snatch a kid?
And the dogs are never alert to them. I don't think that's possible.
So it is more likely, at least in my opinion, Dylan, that Summer, if she was kidnapped, was taken by a family member. Certain risk factors like drug abuse, domestic violence, child services involvement, child abuse, those are all can be contributing factors in these familial kidnappings, right? And Don and Candace both have histories involving some of these issues.
That's true. There's dysfunction. There's substance abuse of sorts.
So let's talk a little bit about Grandis or Grandma Candace, because she has a little bit of a history as well, Dylan. So according to reports, she abandoned Candace and Rose as children, left them with her father, and moved in with her female lover. So she came out as a lesbian and had a female lover and abandoned her family to go be with this woman. Rose disappeared without a trace, which is odd, right? You got this missing daughter, then you're going to have a missing granddaughter. I mean, two things like this, devastating things happen to one family. I don't know. The math don't add up for me. Grandma's brother, whose name was Warren, was in prison for over 40 years for convictions which included 8 counts of incest with a minor.
Oh, my God. And that's the 2 she leaves her kids with?
Well, that's the brother of the grandmother.
Oh.
So it would be her daughter's uncles.
Okay.
But I'm
Jesus.
just saying, this family, obviously there's some dysfunction in this family.
I don't think dysfunction covers that. That's
Well,
bad.
2 weeks after Summer's disappearance, Grandis reportedly left the property, took off and left, to go stay with a sick relative. And some people find that to be strange.
Well, it could be just odd timing, or it could be she's.
Well, your granddaughter's missing. You're
Yeah.
just going to pack up and leave?
And you were with her on her last day and all. I mean, it's not like it's a granddaughter you never see. She's living there with you, right?
So Candace, mom, she married at 19 a man who was 41 at the time. So a lot older than her. And they had 2 children together. She and her ex-husband were convicted of domestic violence. They both have convictions. And the children, aged 2 and 6 months, were taken into protective custody and later permanently adopted out to other families. Candace has a history of drug and alcohol abuse and tested positive for alcohol and marijuana on the day Summer went missing. Now, we know marijuana can stay in your system up to 30 days. So, maybe she smoked that day. Maybe she used some other point. But as far as alcohol goes, that typically stays in your system for a pretty short period.
Right.
Which suggests that she could have been drinking on the day Summer disappeared.
Which necessarily doesn't in itself point to any type of wrongdoing.
Well, it doesn't, but if she's driving the family around,
Well,
she's
yeah.
driving her mom and her kid around, they go to the creek or the pond and the little girl's swimming, if mom's there drinking, I mean, that's not
Well, it's not okay.
good.
No, but
Well, but I think some people are pointing to that well, if she was drinking, then she might have not been watching the little girl and she may have had an accident. And then mom was trying to cover it up because she didn't want to take responsibility for her drinking and how it affected this. Again, speculation.
Well, and she did buy the 15-year-old a twisted tea and a vape. And now you could say on the one hand, well, maybe that's just how his mom is. She don't care. But no, his mom did care because he had actually admitted to her, told on himself that, hey, this, I had this thing. So it doesn't sound like mom's okay with that.
Right.
So again, it doesn't help your character as far as Candace's character goes.
Now, from reports what I've found about Don, his parents divorced when he was young, and his mom married a very violent man who was quite abusive and also sexually molested Don's 2 sisters. So around the age of 12, Don went to live with his biological father in Utah. Now, the day after Summer went missing, Jeannie, Don's stepsister, allegedly called law enforcement to report that Don had molested her when she was 5 and that this continued for 7 years. Now, I say this is alleged because there's a YouTube interview with her, but I can't find any information where this has been reported anywhere. I guess substantial news.
Anywhere besides this interview on YouTube.
It's been some sort of interview on YouTube, right? So Don has apparently come out and said that this was a consensual relationship with his stepsister and that she initiated it.
Okay.
Now, this is all according to this YouTube video, which we know this may be total pile of shit, but if this real person is Jeannie, she's got a lot to say about it. Now, Don has admitted to using meth in the past and that he also got into trouble for selling cocaine when he was much younger. He had 2 children from a previous marriage. Both he and his ex-wife were meth users in the past. And so they both have these drug histories, and they've obviously, mingled with some unsavory people.
Very heavy drug.
Yeah.
Where you could literally come to and not know what you did. I mean, yeah.
Since Summer disappeared over 2 years ago, an age-progressed photo has been released by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Age progression is typically done by forensic artists, and it can't be considered 100% accurate. But I think they've done a pretty good job with the age progression photo, and I will post that with other related photos on our social media. You can see it on Twitter or Instagram. Though periodic searches have been conducted in the area, law enforcement has stated they are receiving fewer tips as time goes on. And despite nationwide attention, Summer Wells remains missing. The Wells have been working with Child Protective Services to get their 3 sons back into their custody. Dawn said they weren't allowed contact with their sons for the first 6 months that the boys were in state care. Summer turned 7 in February, and if anyone has information regarding Summer's disappearance, credible tips can be called in at 1-800-TBI-FIND. And that's TBI-FIND.
Okay. Well, yeah, you never know. You never know who might know that little piece of information that breaks this thing wide open.
So, Dylan, that is what I was able to find on the Summer Wells case. There is quite a bit of information out there. Some of it seems almost kind of vague, like a lot of the news reports are more vague. Getting a lot of details has been kind of difficult. I mean, even if you listen to the family, Don, he's been in a lot of, he's been in interviews. They've got that Dr. Phil. There's not a lot of like these people aren't very detail oriented when they're giving you their answers.
Right.
It's a lot of yes and no.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Or just like very simple answers, which I don't know if they've been advised to do that or what. But I mean, there's a lot more information in this case that I would like to have, but it's just not being reported or they're not giving it up.
I gotta say, it's a bit worrisome with some of the characters around this family have some troubling past. And I will also say, you can look me up and you'll see in the past I was charged with assault on a female. I didn't really assault a female. I didn't, I swear. But
you weren't convicted.
No, I was. I've not been convicted of any of that. But I've been charged. If they dug in my past, they for unfortunately charges still show up. They shouldn't. I think it's bullshit if you're not convicted of it. But it's on there, and arrested for marijuana. No one's gonna look squeaky clean.
Well, that's the thing
clean,
is, like,
but
if any, I'm sure a lot of folks, if any of their past came out in a situation like this, I mean, we all have skeletons in our closet, and if people dig deep enough, you can probably always find something that can paint you as a dirtbag, or that people can misconstrue, or they don't have the background information. It's just like with Don Wells speaking about his son's Arkansas conviction as a sex offender. People saw that his son was a convicted sex offender, and they ran with these stories. Well, he's guilty. He must have done something. He's a pedophile. Look, this whole family's fucked up. Look at this dad. Look what his son did. That kind of thing.
Right.
But then when you actually see, I mean, he's saying, well, yeah, but it's not what you think. My son was 19. This girl was 18 months younger.
Well, that's more of a Romeo-Juliet situation. But I must say, like I said, if you look at anyone or any family, there's going to be stuff that you could talk about and speculate on. But I got to say, with the incest charges and all this and there's obvious substance.
I would say accusations maybe more than charges, because it seems like it hasn't been substantiated.
Well, I was talking about the other family member who did 40 years.
Oh,
or
we're
whatever.
talking about the Grandis's brother, the great uncle.
Yeah.
The grunkle. So
well,
you
that's
have
scary.
a Grandis and a grunkle.
I mean, that's scary.
No, that's not okay.
That's a predator in your family. And that, I mean, I'm not saying this guy did or anything, but it seems like they've had plenty of dysfunction on top of dysfunction for multiple generations.
Yeah, and I mean, let's be honest, some of
substance.
this is like a little more than just dysfunction.
That's what I'm saying.
Some of this is pretty fucked up.
Yes, it is.
It's pretty fucked up.
Yeah, even a consensual sexual relationship with your stepsister is not okay. But it happens. You know what I'm saying? But when you lump all this together and when you lined all that out in a row there, I was like, wow, this family's been through a lot and they've dealt with a lot, but there's also a lot of kind of shitty people around.
There's a lot of trauma.
A lot of trauma.
But, a lot of times, Dylan, people can take traumas from their childhood, and because they grew up in a fucked up situation, maybe don't always recognize later on that this stuff's wrong or not okay.
Exactly.
And
that's exactly what I was trying to get at. Seriously. You nailed it.
What do you think?
I don't know.
I mean, I'm honestly left, because at the beginning of this case, as it's been unfolding over the last few years, I remember in 2021 when we got that Amber Alert.
Oh, yeah.
I remember
it.
because I remember the next day seeing that it was this little girl, and my thought was like, oh no, because the Evelyn Boswell case had been so recent, where this child was reported missing, and then come to find out, mom has been arrested and charged with murdering this child, and the little girl was found in an outbuilding on her grandpa's property.
With
And
all
this
her
is
belongings.
after months of searches, months of people all over trying to help. We had the web sleuths. You had law enforcement kind of conducting a similar search.
Lies from mom, lies from grandma.
Yes,
They're-
inconsistent stories, all that. So that story was very fresh in my brain because for whatever reason, that story really like hit me in my heart. I still can't get over that little baby's face. She was the cutest thing. And what happened to her, it was awful. But I like followed that case very closely. And so then when we got that Amber Alert about Summer, I mean, I remember looking at that news story and thinking, oh my gosh, it's the same damn thing. It's
Yeah.
the same. This is just like Evelyn Boswell, just over the mountain from these folks. Like, this isn't okay. And immediately having suspicions, obviously, about the family. I think a lot of folks initially were kind of like, but that could have been because of the Boswell case, because it was very similar. Like, this isn't just a stranger randomly does this, and these stories don't make sense and whatever. But after having researched it, I think I'm left now even more confused than I was when I started, because I really don't know what's happened to this child. I can't say for sure what's happened to her. I
No.
don't know if the family was involved. I don't know if it was a stranger abduction. Like, nothing, no part of the story, like, makes sense to me or sits right with me.
I don't know. I find I think if someone took her outside of the home, and I gotta say, it seems like mom and dad have been raked over the coals this way and that way pretty good. So
They have been.
I really feel like it would shook out by now or some type of evidence found, be it, cell phones, whatever, interview after interview. I'm sure they were probably, being pretty tough with them, especially in the beginning, I'm going to guess. I don't think they did something to her, but I can't be sure. I can't rule out death by neglect.
They don't seem like the most sophisticated criminals in the world.
No,
so
right.
I would have a hard time imagining that mom and dad were able to cover this up.
Beat the GBI, beat the FBI,
But at
beat
the
everybody.
same time, it happens.
Yeah.
Gary Ridgway's a fucking moron, but he was the damn Green River Killer for years without getting caught.
It's true.
And the guy's got the IQ of a tater tot, so who knows?
It's true. A crispy tater tot. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just like you. So I think it's got to be, or very likely to be, death by neglect or child abuse.
Yes.
And by neglect, you weren't watching them swimming. They fell off, hit their head. You didn't take them to the doctor, something like that. Not nefarious, but at the same time, shitty parent. Or someone who knew of Summer, knew of the family, was comfortable around the dogs, knew about the path from the road, had a layout, had been there before. So be it family, friend, someone connected to Summer who knew Summer, who the family knows. I think that's really your leading options.
I agree.
I think the stranger predator just out riding the country roads, hoping he finds a 5-year-old up on this mountaintop, very unlikely. I think that's the least likely. But I think it's someone known to the family, knew of Summer, knew they could get her because they weren't helicopter parents, obviously, and knew she runs around and plays and things like that. And it's even, and she wouldn't go up to strangers. So if this is someone known to Summer, she knows it's friends or family to mom and dad, could explain why she went to them or approached them, at the edge of the property near the path and then was carried down to the road. So I don't know.
And I think at the end of the day, what hasn't really been discussed in news and podcasts in the true crime community is the 3 boys. I feel so bad for them. They're just kids. They're just little boys. And their sister's gone missing. Then they are taken from their home.
Their whole lives.
Their whole lives are shaken up.
Yeah.
So they're going through this trauma of having a missing sister. Then they're shoved into the foster care system for months, not able to speak to their mom and dad, probably don't know what the hell's going on, upset and don't have any kind of normalcy. I don't know if they're getting the therapy and the help that they need. But they're the ones who are also victims in all of this because they've been traumatized and then like re-traumatized.
Yeah. That's a tall order.
You know, I mean, it's put these boys in a really bad position. And I just really hope that whoever has them, that they're getting the help that they need. And I don't know what the circumstances of the removal from the home, like why exactly they were taken by the state. Maybe the state had a good reason to take these boys, and maybe they don't need to go back to mom and dad. I don't know. But at the end of the day, these poor little boys have been through hell.
Yeah, they have. And we don't know if they're in a better circumstance. I mean, you hear all these not great stories about the foster care system. You know, I'm sure there's plenty of good ones, but it seems like you always hear about the negative. And maybe they're better off there. Not, and it's like they said they're trying to get their 3 boys back, but then they moved off. I mean, I can understand if you're having to move for financial reasons, jobs, to get the hell away from the story or accusations. But I wouldn't be that comfortable moving away from my 3 sons being removed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm like, these people were being, harassed.
Yeah, I mean, I get it,
They
I guess.
felt maybe unsafe in this home and didn't want to have their 3 boys there. Because if the truth is a stranger came to that house and kidnapped one of their children,
Or anyone.
I would feel uncomfortable having my kids in that same place. You know what I'm
Even
saying?
if it's a friend or a family member.
I understand
Yeah.
why they packed up and moved, and it would be hard to stay in that home and see your daughter's things and have those memories. And I don't know. I mean, it's just a really bad situation for everybody involved. And my hope is that Summer's found and that we get some answers one day. And, those answers might be able to clear Dawn and Candace.
Maybe so.
But who knows?
Well, it's a
where
2-year
she
anniversary.
is. I mean, it's 2 years with no answer and no real hot leads and no physical evidence. I mean, it's tough for investigators. Because I feel like they've really exhausted all the search efforts that they can, and they've tried and they've interviewed and they've followed up on 1,000 tips, and they still aren't any closer to solving the case than they were 2 years ago.
It's sad. It is a 2-year anniversary, so maybe this will bring it back around through the news cycle, and maybe something will shake loose. Or maybe, they'll get lucky. A lot of times it's just pure luck that a traffic stop or something like that, or someone gets in trouble for something else, and they're like, hey, I know about this, kind of shit like that. So I don't know. All we can do is hope, but unfortunately, I don't know that we'll ever know any more about poor little Summer.
Well, Dylan, that has been the Summer Wells case. As I have been able to research it, I do appreciate everybody who's tuning in and listening to Mountain Murders and downloading the podcast, of course. Got a lot of folks out there who send us really kind words telling us how much they love the show, and we appreciate all of you. We got a really nice message from Tammy.
Thank you, Tammy.
She loves the show, so thanks for sending us an email, Tammy. And if you want to email the podcast, mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com is a good way to reach us. We are also on social media. You can find us on Instagram at Appalachian True Crime and on Twitter at Mountain Murders.
Yes, and thank you, Anne Marie, the sponsor of today's show, for signing up over there at Patreon.
It was Angie Marie.
Angie Marie, I'm sorry. Angie Marie, you're special to me, even though I messed your name up. Angie Marie, thank you very much. And she did join us over there at Patreon forward. Say it, Heather. Damn it, I used to know it.
Patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast.
Yes.
She is supporting the show, which we do appreciate, especially in our time of need, Dylan.
We really do. This is a very, very important.
And if you've ever thought about joining Patreon, there are a few great reasons why you can join and should join. We've got our ad-free content. We have bonus content. We've started a Mountain Murders movie club, and each month we watch a true crime-related documentary, docuseries, or a movie that's based on a true crime, and we discuss it. We do a little episode to cover the movie club episodes and the various shows we're watching. And also, we just released a new Patreon exclusive episode on the mysterious death of Meriwether Lewis.
That was a wild story.
Which is a kind of a strange tale. So we cover true crime. Sometimes we cover Appalachian stories, folklore, and then once in a while I just pop up with some strange, mysterious case or something maybe you've never heard of.
Yeah,
and we make it a Patreon episode.
yeah, we've been building up that extra content for years, so there's quite a bit of it. And you can, I'm loving the movie club. That's a lot of fun to watch it and then discuss it. And
Yeah, this past month we watched Love and Death, the HBO series, which covers the Candy Montgomery Betty Gore murder story, and also the serial killer capital of the world, Baton Rouge, which was a Peacock show, and it was pretty interesting.
And we did the Texas Killing Fields.
Yeah, that was our April movie club. So check us out on Patreon. Okay, it's we're getting into like some hours here, so I'm gonna wrap things up, Dylan, because my voice, since my life is just I'm sick now forever, my voice is a little fried. Let's say goodbye to our friends and family.
Yeah, you can go in there and unwrap me. Bye.
You are sassy. You are sassy and saucy today.
I'm gonna keep mopping. I was having fun mopping.
Man, you cleaned the house. You did good.
Yeah.
I'm a brag. Dylan cleaned the house. He finally got around to folding some clothes.
See,
I appreciate you.
No. See, that was positive for a minute, but you throwing that finally in there with those.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Happy Father's Day.
Okay, I'm not sure that you do.
I do appreciate it.
Happy Father's Day to anyone out there acting like a parent. We love you.
We do.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
Bye,
right.
Dylan.
Bye, Heather.